Before we begin, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story, and give this video a like. Today, we're diving into the mysterious story of the McStay family, 4 loved ones who vanished without a trace. Their disappearance shocked the nation and quickly became one of the most talked about cases in the United States. The story starts here. The McStay family, Joseph, Summer, and their 2 young sons, seemed to have it all. Joseph, 40, was a self-made businessman with a rapidly growing company. Summer, 43, devoted her days to caring for their children. Johnny, a bright and curious 4-year-old, and Joseph Jr., just 3, full of energy and wonder. This family led a life many would envy, a peaceful home, financial stability, and a future full of promise. Joseph McStay was the founder of a growing company called Earth-Inspired Products. He built it from the ground up alongside 2 partners, Dan Cavanaugh and Charles Merritt, also known as Chase. Their business specialized in luxury water fountains, and each of them played a key role. Joseph was the creative mind designing the fountains. Charles was the craftsman bringing those designs to life. And Dan handled the digital side, managing the company's website and online presence. The company was a success, not just locally but internationally. It was expanding fast, and profits were climbing. What's important to know here is that Joseph had already built this business before marrying Summer. His future looked bright, maybe too bright for what was coming next. The McStay family had settled into a beautiful home in Fallbrook, California, a peaceful town where life moved slowly. They had just moved in at the end of 2009, ready to start a new chapter. As I mentioned, their life seemed calm and stable, ordinary in every way. But just 2 months later, on February 4th, 2010, everything changed. That was the day the McStay family disappeared, without warning and without a trace. What happened next would leave investigators and the entire nation completely baffled. Joseph's father, Patrick McStay, was the last person known to speak with him. That call happened on February 4th, 2010. According to Patrick, Joseph said he was preparing to leave for a business meeting at a restaurant and even mentioned which one. Later, his business partner, Chase, confirmed that the meeting was indeed supposed to take place just between the 2 of them. After that phone call, the McStay family vanished completely. No messages, no updates, no sign of life. Their sudden disappearance sent waves of fear through their relatives. Over the next few days, family members tried again and again to reach Joseph and Summer, but their calls went unanswered. No response came from Joseph. No response from Summer. It was as if the entire family had simply dissolved into thin air, leaving behind one haunting question: where had they gone? Susan, Joseph's mother, made another attempt to contact him, this time sending an email. She asked where he was, whether anything had happened, and even if he might be trying to escape from something. She promised that no matter what he was going through, she would support him. But as the days passed, there was still no response. Filled with worry and a sense of helplessness, Susan turned to her other son, Michael. She asked him to go to Joseph's home and see if he could uncover what was happening. What Michael discovered inside would only deepen the mystery even further. 9 days after the McStay family vanished, on February 13th, 2010, Joseph's brother, Michael, decided to check on their home himself. As he approached, he noticed something immediately. Every door to the house was locked tight. It was as if the home had been completely sealed, with no one coming in or out. Then his eyes fell on the driveway. The family car, Joseph's vehicle, was missing. The sight sent a chill down his spine. Consumed by worry and confusion, Michael made a bold move. He slipped carefully through a window, determined to find out what had really happened. But what awaited him inside was shocking. In the backyard, the family's 2 dogs were left alone, with no food or water. The kitchen was a scene of neglect, groceries left out of the fridge, now rotten and spoiled. The entire house seemed frozen in time, as if the family had walked out one moment and vanished the next. Everything in the house seemed to point to one chilling conclusion. The McStays hadn't been gone for just a few hours. They had been missing for days, and not by their own choice. Dogs left without food or water for days. Fresh groceries abandoned until they spoiled. This wasn't the behavior of any family leaving home voluntarily. Something dark had clearly occurred. For Michael, one realization hit hard. The McStays hadn't left of their own free will. They had either been running from something or something terrible had befallen them. There were only two possibilities, and neither offered any comfort. Despite the growing fear, Michael made a painful choice. He decided to wait a little longer before contacting the police, clinging to the hope that Joseph, Summer, and the children might walk through the door, or at least get in touch. But as hours stretched into days, that hope began to fade, slipping further and further away. 15 days after the McStay family vanished on February 19, 2010, police finally got the call, and the investigation officially began. Detectives acted fast, starting with a search of the family's home, looking for any clue to explain what had happened. But they found nothing. No blood, no signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle. To investigators, it appeared that no crime had taken place at all. And so, in those early days, they settled on one chilling assumption. The McStays had left their home willingly. Investigators began by combing through the family's phone records, focusing on the day they vanished. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary. Summer had a casual conversation with her sister. Joseph made a few routine calls. When police searched the house, they seized every computer and device, hoping for a clue. They examined them carefully, but came up empty. No strange messages. No signs of danger. Nothing unusual at all on February 4th, 2010, the day the McStay family disappeared. Well, almost nothing. Internet history revealed something curious. Searches suggesting the family might have been planning a trip to Mexico. But had they really gone? No one could say for sure. And with no solid evidence of foul play, investigators still couldn't even confirm that a crime had occurred. Nearly 3 weeks later, the investigation took a significant turn. Security footage from a neighbor's home captured the McStay family's vehicle leaving their driveway on February 4, 2010, at exactly 7:47 p.m. Police quickly matched the license plate and obtained a warrant to search for the missing car. After the search alert went out, police finally located the McStay family's car. It had already been towed and placed in an impound lot. Investigators learned it had been left for days in the parking lot of a shopping center in San Isidro, just an hour and 10 minutes from a McStay home in Fallbrook. San Isidro sits right at the edge of the United States-Mexico border. The vehicle had been removed on February 8th, only 4 days after the family vanished. With the car discovered so close to the United States-Mexico border, investigators began to suspect the McStay family might have crossed into Mexico. To test this theory, they headed to the San Isidro border crossing and examined the security footage. This particular crossing is one where travelers often pass through on foot. While reviewing the footage, investigators spotted something intriguing. A family, strikingly similar to the McStays, was seen walking across the border, right around the time they vanished. It seemed to support the growing theory the McStay family had crossed into Mexico voluntarily. That idea gained even more weight when police examined the computers taken from the home. Search history revealed queries about traveling to Mexico and crossing the border. And there was more. Summer, Joseph's wife, had even attempted to purchase a Spanish-language learning program. Piece by piece, it painted a picture of a family preparing for a trip, one they may have planned themselves. As mentioned earlier, investigators were convinced the McStay family had headed for Mexico, and they had several reasons for believing it. Their vehicle had been discovered abandoned near the United States-Mexico border. Surveillance cameras showed a family resembling them crossing on foot. Computer searches revealed detailed inquiries about traveling to Mexico and navigating the border. And Summer herself had shown interest in learning Spanish, the primary language spoken in Mexico and across much of Central America. All the signs pointed to a move south. But was it simply a planned trip or a desperate escape? And if they were running, what or who were they running from? What made the situation even more unsettling was the secrecy. The McStay family hadn't told a single friend or relative they were leaving. One day they were there, the next they were gone, suddenly, without warning, and under a cloud of mystery. When investigators presented their findings to the McStay's relatives, the response was immediate and unwavering. They flatly rejected the idea. In their eyes, the people on that border footage weren't Joseph, Summer, or the boys, not even close. They were certain of it. The McStay family's relatives had clear reasons for doubting the Mexico theory. The border footage was grainy and low quality, far too blurry to make a positive identification. The man's walk in the video didn't resemble Joseph's distinct stride. Joseph and Summer had repeatedly said they had no interest in visiting Mexico, believing it was unsafe. And perhaps most telling, it was impossible to imagine them vanishing without saying a word to their loved ones. For the McStay family's relatives, the idea of a voluntary trip to Mexico made no sense. Their objections shattered the theory completely. With no other solid leads, the investigation essentially returned to square one. And for the next 4 years, the case remained cold. Nothing new emerged, and the mystery of the McStay family persisted. 4 years later, on November 11, 2013, San Bernardino police received a call from a motorcyclist riding through California's Mojave Desert. He had stumbled upon a fragment of a human skull. Officers rushed to the scene and made a grim discovery: 2 shallow graves. Each contained the remains of an adult and a child. DNA testing brought devastating confirmation. The remains belonged to Joseph, Summer, and their 2 young boys, ending years of uncertainty for their loved ones, but revealing a horrifying truth. The coroner's report confirmed the unimaginable. Each member of the McStay family had been struck in the head with a heavy object, causing fatal skull fractures. Then police uncovered the murder weapon, hidden in one of the graves, a hammer. It was clear. This was no tragic accident. This was deliberate, cold-blooded murder. Police struggled to find any fingerprints or DNA on the bodies or the murder weapon. The years in the desert's scorching heat had erased almost every trace of the crime. The only lead they uncovered was a set of tire tracks near the graves, most likely left by the killer's vehicle. Investigators also observed that the bodies had been wrapped in blankets. This suggested the horrifying possibility that the family had been killed inside their own home, bundled in household fabrics, and then transported by car to the desert. In other words, they hadn't been moved alive. It was a compelling theory, though not yet confirmed. The investigation was reignited. Police expanded their search, desperate for any new leads that might point to the killer. They re-examined the family's car, the same vehicle abandoned in that odd, suspicious location. Detectives also interviewed relatives and close friends, probing for anyone who might have had a motive. In the end, all family members were cleared of suspicion. This narrowed the focus to those closest to Joseph's professional life, his 2 business partners, Dan Kavanaugh and Charles Chase Merritt. Dan Kavanaugh managed the company's website, keeping it running and updated. When police reviewed Joseph's emails, they discovered exchanges between him and Dan that revealed a strained relationship. Dan had repeatedly complained about not being paid for his work and even threatened to shut down the website if he didn't receive his money. When questioned, Dan downplayed everything, insisting these were just ordinary workplace disagreements and denying any serious threats. He also provided solid evidence that he wasn't in California when the McStay family disappeared. Because of this, Dan was never arrested and was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. As mentioned earlier, the family's car had initially drawn attention because it was found in a suspicious location near the border. But the inspection at the time wasn't thorough for a couple of key reasons. First, when the car was discovered, police were focused entirely on locating the family rather than conducting a detailed examination of the vehicle. Second, investigators initially believed the McStays had left voluntarily. They assumed the car's location wasn't linked to a crime, so a close inspection wasn't seen as urgent, and few clues were collected. After the bodies were discovered, the car had to be examined again, this time with far more scrutiny. There were several compelling reasons for this. If the family hadn't gone to Mexico, how did their car end up so close to the border? Someone else must have driven it there. And if the murders occurred at the McStay home, the killer could have used the car to transport the bodies. The vehicle might contain crucial evidence pointing directly to the murderer. A deeper forensic examination of the car revealed critical new evidence. Investigators found DNA that didn't match any member of McStay family. It belonged to someone in their inner circle, Charles Merritt, Joseph's business partner. This breakthrough immediately put Charles in the spotlight as the main suspect. Charles told both police and the media that he was close to the McStay family and a good friend of Joseph. He explained that they often met at restaurants and claimed that his DNA being in the car was completely normal because of their friendship. He denied any involvement in the disappearance or murder. Yet he admitted one unsettling detail: he was the last person to see Joseph alive. He even confirmed this on a national television broadcast. The investigation intensified around Charles, the prime suspect, especially as new details emerged about his true relationship with Joseph. Their connection was far from friendly. Joseph viewed Charles as a burden, both personally and professionally. He had discovered that Charles had been manipulating the company's accounts to line his own pockets. Summer, Joseph's wife, distrusted Charles because of his shady character and criminal history, which included time in jail for theft and robbery. Charles struggled with a gambling addiction, willing to do almost anything to get money. He owed Joseph a significant sum, sparking frequent arguments between them. On top of that, Charles had accumulated large debts at multiple casinos. These facts revealed a strained, contentious relationship between Joseph and Charles, marked by constant arguments. Most disputes revolved around the money Charles owed Joseph. Adding to the tension, Charles had been tampering with the company's accounts, creating even more conflict. Investigators also discovered that, after the McStay family vanished, Charles had transferred large sums of money from the company into his own account, even going so far as to forge Joseph's signature. Another critical clue came from Charles's phone records. They revealed that he had repeatedly visited the area where the bodies were later found during the family's disappearance. Police found this extremely suspicious. They suspected Charles had gone there to bury the bodies and conceal the evidence. There seemed to be no other reason for him to be in that remote location so frequently. Charles Merritt was arrested on November 5, 2014. Even with a mountain of evidence against him, he continued to deny any involvement in the murders of the McStay family. He claimed he had nothing to do with their disappearance, but investigators didn't believe him. Despite his denials, the police and prosecutors pressed on. They gathered all the evidence and prepared to take him to court, determined to see justice served for Joseph, Summer, and their 2 young boys. Police were confident they had enough evidence to convict Charles Merritt. The case against him included several damning points. His DNA was found inside the McStay family's car. Phone records showed he repeatedly visited the desert area where the bodies were buried during the time the family was missing. He had a strong motive. Joseph had caught him stealing money from their company and was planning to report him to police. The 2 men had been fighting constantly over money. Tire tracks at the burial site matched Charles's vehicle perfectly. Based on the evidence, police pieced together their version of events. Charles Merritt had been stealing from a company. When Joseph McStay discovered this, he threatened to fire Charles and report him to the police. Faced with losing everything and possibly going to prison, Charles decided to silence Joseph permanently. On February 4, 2010, Charles met Joseph at a restaurant during the day. Later that evening, investigators believe he went to McStay home, murdered Joseph, Summer, and their 2 boys with a hammer, and then drove their bodies deep into the desert, where he buried them in shallow graves. During this period, Charles went back to the McStay family's home and used one of their computers to search for information about traveling to Mexico, an attempt to mislead investigators. He then drove the family's car to a location near the United States-Mexico border, trying to create the impression that they had voluntarily left for Mexico. According to the police, this is what happened based on the evidence. However, Charles Merritt never admitted to the crime. Charles was arrested in November 2014, but his trial wouldn't begin until January 2019. The long wait was the result of his lawyers repeatedly requesting postponements. His lawyers presented 3 main arguments. First, they claimed the case was highly complex and that the evidence was too weak, based mostly on assumptions that required further examination. Second, they argued that investigators had overlooked other possible explanations. Third, they suggested that another person could have been involved. To challenge the accusations, Charles's defense put forward these arguments. Finding his DNA in the McStay family's car was not unusual, as he had a close relationship with them. The presence of his phone at certain locations did not necessarily prove he was physically there. Financial disputes alone were not a strong enough motive for murder. None of Charles's DNA was discovered at the burial site or on the suspected murder weapon. No witnesses came forward to directly link him to the crime. In June 2019, the jury found Charles Merritt guilty of first-degree murder in the deaths of the entire McStay family. Several months later, in January 2020, he was sentenced to death. The court determined that he acted alone and that greed was the driving motive behind the murders. The disappearance of the McStay family quickly became a widely discussed public story, sparking intense debate and attracting major media attention across the United States. People closely followed the case, examining the evidence presented by police and the outcome in court. Some argued that the proof against Charles Merritt was weak or unclear, offering alternative explanations that aligned with the defense's claims and casting doubt on the verdict. In the end, opinions remain divided. Some are convinced the case is closed, while others believe it is still shrouded in mystery and unanswered questions. And you, what do you think about this case? Is Charles Merritt the killer, or could it be someone else? Was the evidence strong and enough to convict him? Do you have any other ideas about what happened to the McStay family? I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to support us. See you in the next video with a new story.